When I was 19, I spent the fall living with my uncle in Salem, Massachusetts. He owned a small, old funeral home that had been in our family for 3 generations. It was the kind of building that always smelled slightly like formaldehyde and cold metal. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt like I wasn't alone, even when I was. My uncle was a quiet, strange man with odd habits and very specific rules. He told me never to answer the front door after midnight and to always knock twice before entering the prep room. But the one rule he was most serious about was never, ever opening the 3rd casket in the cold room. He said it like a warning, not a joke. His face went pale when he brought it up. I thought he was just trying to mess with me, like some creepy initiation into the business. But I still nodded and said I understood, even though I had no plans to poke around. The cold room was used to store bodies before embalming, and it was always kept locked. Only my uncle had the key, and even he rarely went in there unless he had to. One night, about 3 weeks into my stay, my uncle was called out unexpectedly. He left me in charge, saying it'd only be for a few hours, and that no one was expected to show up. Before he left, he grabbed my shoulder and looked me dead in the eyes. "Do not go into the cold room," he said, "no matter what you hear." That last part caught me off guard. I asked him what he meant by hear. He didn't answer. He just grabbed his coat and left without another word. It was the first time I'd be alone in the building overnight. I wasn't scared exactly, but something about the way he said it kept echoing in my head. I tried distracting myself by cleaning the front room and organizing paperwork. The building was old, and the walls creaked with every gust of wind outside. I heard things sometimes, soft thumps, shifting noises, distant groans, but I told myself it was just the pipes or the old floorboards settling. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I first heard it, something like a soft knock. At first I thought someone was at the front door, but when I checked, no one was there. The knock came again, louder this time, and I realized it was coming from the back, specifically from behind the cold room door. I stood there frozen, listening, trying to convince myself it was something mechanical. Maybe one of the trays had shifted, or a shelf had creaked under pressure. But then the knock came again, 3 times in a row, slow and deliberate, like someone was trying to get out, not in. I remembered what my uncle said and backed away, heart pounding in my chest. I went to the office and shut the door behind me, trying to block it out. But curiosity gnawed at me, harder with every passing minute. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was trying to communicate. I made it until 2:45 before I gave in. The knocking had stopped by then, but the silence felt even worse. I told myself I wouldn't open anything, just check to make sure everything was okay. So I went to the hook where my uncle kept the spare keys. There were 2 brass keys on the ring, one for the front and one for the cold room. I hesitated for a moment before taking it off and walking slowly down the hallway. The walls seemed tighter somehow, the air colder than usual. My fingers trembled as I pushed the key into the lock. The door creaked open with a groan that echoed all the way to the front of the building. Inside it was freezing, even colder than I expected, and the lights flickered above. 3 steel caskets sat in a row on rolling trays, their lids bolted shut. I felt a sudden urge to leave, like I was somewhere I shouldn't be. I stepped in cautiously, avoiding the 3rd one like it might lash out and grab me. It looked older than the others, streaked with rust and a dent in the side. It also had no tag, which was unusual. Every body we received had paperwork. This one was completely unmarked. The 2nd casket rattled suddenly, and I jumped back, nearly falling over a tray. But it didn't move again. I leaned in, pressing my ear to the metal just out of instinct. I don't know what I expected to hear, but what I did hear wasn't right. A soft breathing sound, slow, steady, like someone was inside, alive. My blood went cold. I ran out of the room and slammed the door shut behind me. I turned the key and yanked it out, locking it tight like my life depended on it. Whatever was in there, it didn't belong in this world, or at least not anymore. I sat in the office until sunrise, jumping at every sound. My uncle returned just after dawn, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. He noticed the keys were gone and didn't say a word, just walked to the cold room. I heard the door open, followed by a deep sigh that seemed heavy with regret. Then he came back to the office and sat across from me. "I told you not to open it," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the floor. "I didn't open it," I replied, "but I heard something. Breathing." He looked at me then, And for the first time, I saw fear in his face. "That's why I told you never to listen too long," he said. I wanted to ask him what was inside that third casket, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. Eventually, he said something that stuck with me ever since. "It doesn't want out, it wants attention. And once you give it that, it follows." He stood up, poured himself a drink from the locked cabinet behind his desk. I had never seen him drink before, not once in my entire life. He stared into the glass like it could explain things I wasn't ready to understand. Then he finally spoke again. "We should never have accepted that delivery. Apparently, years ago, a transport company dropped it off by mistake. It wasn't part of any scheduled funeral or body they were preparing. There was no name, no history, just that dented third casket, sealed tight. My grandfather, who ran the place then, refused to send it back. He claimed it was a special case and told everyone to leave it alone. But strange things started happening in the funeral home not long after. Lights flickering, rooms turning ice cold without explanation, and voices whispering from vents. People stopped coming to the services. Business nearly collapsed. Eventually, they moved it to the cold room and kept it locked away. They believed keeping it cold made it quieter, less aware, maybe even dormant. But once in a while, when someone got too close or lingered too long, it would knock as if to remind them it hadn't forgotten. I asked my uncle why they didn't destroy it, bury it, do something permanent. He shook his head and said, "You can't bury what refuses the ground." He said someone tried once, an employee back in the 90s. They found him collapsed next to the casket, eyes wide open, lips blue. I didn't want to hear more, but I knew I had to. Whatever it was, I'd already heard it breathe. That felt like a connection. My uncle warned me not to acknowledge it again, not to speak to it. "You've already made it curious. Don't make it feel invited." That entire day, I couldn't shake the feeling something was watching me. Even outside, walking through Salem's narrow streets, I felt it. Heavy, invisible. It was like dragging an extra shadow I didn't ask for. Everything I passed had a faint echo, like it remembered me. That night, as I lay in the guest room upstairs, I heard it again. Not knocking, not breathing. Something else. A low whisper near the window. It didn't come from outside. It came from the direction of the cold room. And it said my name. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I just stared at the door. The whisper had said my name so clearly, like someone I knew. When I got up to check the hallway, everything looked normal. But I could feel the weight of something sitting in the silence. The next morning, I asked my uncle if he'd heard anything. He didn't answer at first. He just stared at his coffee. Then he looked up and said, "Now you have to leave." I thought he was joking. He wasn't even close to joking. "You opened a door in its direction when you listened," he said. "You let it know you're willing to hear. That's enough for it." He helped me pack and told me not to look back. Then he drove me to the bus station himself without another word. I didn't go back to Salem for years after that, but strange things started happening no matter where I moved. Mail would arrive without return addresses, just blank envelopes. Once I got a photo of a casket sitting in snow. My nights were worse than anything, though. I'd hear tapping sounds coming from inside my closet. Always 3 knocks, never more, never less. One time I saw breath in the air, even though the heater was on. I tried therapy, prayer, even moving to the West Coast. But something always followed, just out of sight. It never did anything violent or obvious, just present. Like a noise in the walls that disappears when someone enters. Years later, I found out my uncle had passed away. No one knew the exact cause. He just didn't wake up. They buried him in the family plot just outside Salem. Against my better judgment, I returned for the funeral. After the service, I walked past the old funeral home. The windows were all boarded up, but one door was ajar. I don't know why, but I went in. Everything looked untouched, frozen in time, except the cold room door. It was wide open. The casket was gone. The chain on the floor had been snapped like it rusted overnight. There were footprints, bare, wet, and too long to be human. And there was one thing left behind, a note with my name on it. I didn't read it. I burned it. And that night, I didn't go home. I drove until sunrise, but somewhere along the road, I heard the whisper again, closer this time, like it was sitting in the back seat. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell icon. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to like and share as well. I used to help out at my uncle's funeral home in Seattle, mostly just on weekends. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than most part-time jobs. The place had been around since the 1920s, tucked between a rusted auto shop and a boarded-up dry cleaner on Rainier Avenue. It always had this cold, hollow smell, like dust, bleach, and something faintly sour no matter how often it was cleaned. I remember the day the child's coffin came in because the delivery driver looked unsettled before he even opened the truck. He kept glancing over his shoulder like someone might be watching from the alley. He handed my uncle a clipboard to sign but didn't say a word the entire time. After he left, my uncle raised an eyebrow and said, "That guy looked like he saw a ghost." He chuckled lightly, but I noticed he didn't open the box right away. The coffin was small, white, with silver trim, the kind you see in movies but never think exists in real life. I helped move it into the cold room, and even through gloves, I swear I could feel the chill radiating off the surface. I figured it was just because it came from the refrigerated truck, but it lingered longer than it should have. My uncle stared at the lid for a long time, then quietly said, "We weren't expecting this one." The next hour was quiet, which wasn't unusual. We didn't have a service scheduled that day, so the chapel lights stayed off, and the building felt even more like a mausoleum than usual. I was working in the prep room, organizing supplies, when I heard my uncle cursing under his breath in his office. That was rare. He kept things professional, even during the worst calls. I walked in and found him flipping through a thick binder we kept for death records and transport manifests. "There's no name," he muttered. "No request, no paperwork, nothing. This came from a dispatch center, not a family." I asked if we should call someone, and he just shook his head slowly, like he was trying to figure out what step he missed. "No funeral home sends a body without notice. This doesn't happen." That evening, I had to stay later than usual. My uncle asked me to lock up while he took a call in the embalming room. As I walked past the cold room, I felt something strange, like static in the air. Not loud, not bright, just that weird heaviness you get before a thunderstorm. I stared at the white coffin for a few seconds longer than I meant to, then pulled the door shut. The next morning, my uncle seemed more distant. He looked like he hadn't slept. I asked if everything was all right with the delivery, and he didn't answer directly. "Do me a favor," he said. "Don't go in the cold room for a while." That wasn't a normal request, especially not for me. I had cleaned that room dozens of times. I nodded, but something about the way he said it made me uneasy. Around lunchtime, curiosity got the better of me. My uncle had left to meet a contact at the coroner's office, and I had the place to myself. I hesitated at the cold room door, remembering his warning, but I convinced myself it was probably nothing. Maybe the paperwork just got lost. Maybe it was someone's mistake, and he didn't want me worrying about it. I stepped inside and was immediately hit by a stronger version of that same heavy, charged air. It wasn't just cold, it was wrong. The white coffin sat untouched in the center of the floor. I didn't open it. I couldn't, but I found myself walking around it slowly, my breath visible in the air. Then I noticed something on the lid. 5 small fingerprints. Faint, but there. Not dust, not smudges. Frost. I backed out of the room, heart pounding. I locked the door behind me without thinking. My uncle came back half an hour later and saw my face. I didn't need to say anything, he just looked at me and said, "You went in, didn't you?" I nodded slowly, and he sighed like he was carrying 100 pounds on his shoulders. "I found the dispatch record," he said. "It was routed to us from a closed funeral home in Idaho. It shut down 8 years ago." That night he stayed late. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I hid in the storage room near the hallway just to see what he'd do. Around 11 p.m., I heard him wheeling the coffin out of the cold room. I peeked out and saw him open it slowly under the soft yellow light of the prep table. He stood still for a long time. Then I heard him whisper, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." His voice cracked like he was holding back tears. I didn't hear anything else, but a few seconds later, every light in the hallway flickered. Just once, just enough to make my stomach twist. My hands were shaking as I stood behind the storage room door. I didn't know whether to step out or stay hidden, but something about the way the lights flickered made me freeze in place. My uncle didn't move for a long time. He just stood there, staring down into the coffin like it had whispered something to him. Then slowly, he closed the lid again, quietly, like he was tucking in a child. When he wheeled the coffin back into the cold room, He locked the door with a different key, one I'd never seen before. Then, without saying a word, he walked out the back exit and drove off. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the frost prints again. I kept thinking, if no one claimed this child, who put them in that box? And why send them to us? The next morning, I finally asked him. I told him I saw everything. I asked who the child was. He sat down slowly, like the weight of it had finally crushed him. "I don't know," he said. "I've never seen a case like this. There's no death certificate, no coroner's report, no name. And here's the worst part." He looked me straight in the eye. The coffin wasn't sealed. That part didn't make sense. Every casket we received was sealed tightly for transport, especially ones with young bodies. It was protocol. My uncle told me he opened the lid expecting to find remains, but what he saw was something different. A small figure, pale and still, but the body didn't look preserved. It looked fresh, too fresh. He said it looked like the child had just laid down and gone to sleep. There were no signs of decay, no makeup, no embalming. The skin had color, the lips weren't blue, and the worst part? The child's eyes were slightly open. I felt something inside me sink when he told me that. "Sometimes," he added, almost like he was afraid to say it, "I think they blinked." I didn't want to hear anymore. I told myself it had to be shock or stress, maybe even hallucination. But then I remembered those frost prints and the static in the air. Things that shouldn't be there, things that weren't part of any normal job. That night when I went home, I put a towel under my door and kept every light in my apartment on. I couldn't explain it. I just didn't feel safe. A few days passed. We didn't speak of it again. The coffin remained in the cold room, untouched. My uncle said we'd report it to the city and let them deal with it. But before that could happen, someone showed up. It was a Thursday afternoon. The sky was gray and the air smelled like rain. A woman came to the front desk. No appointment, no call ahead. She was wearing an old wool coat and gloves, despite the weather being mild. Her voice was soft, but firm. "I'm here for my daughter." I asked her name. She didn't give one. She just stared at me, like she was waiting for me to remember something. I told her we didn't have any services scheduled. But before I could finish, she said, "White coffin, silver edges. She's in the cold room." That's when I knew something wasn't right. I told her to wait and went to find my uncle. When I explained, his face went pale. "We didn't release a name," he whispered. "No one knows it's here." He walked slowly toward the front, but when we got back to the desk, she was gone. We checked the security cameras. There was footage of her entering, slowly, calmly, but none of her leaving. No door opening, no motion on the porch. She just vanished. My uncle didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at the frozen image on the screen. That night, he moved the coffin into the back chamber, away from everything else, and told me not to ask questions anymore. But I couldn't let it go. The next night, I snuck in after hours. I knew the code. I unlocked the back chamber and stepped inside. It was colder than I remembered. The coffin sat in the middle, just as still, just as silent. I stepped closer. I didn't plan to open it, but something in me needed to. I reached for the lid, my fingers numb from the cold. I opened it slowly, inch by inch, expecting to see what I feared most. But the coffin was empty. I stood there, staring down into the empty coffin, unable to move. My breath fogged the air. The silence in the room was heavier than anything I'd ever felt before. It was like something was watching me, but not from the doorway or behind me, from beneath me. Then I heard it. A soft creak, like the shifting of weight on old floorboards. Only, the floor in that room was cement. I stepped back from the casket, every hair on my body standing straight up. That's when I saw it. 2 tiny footprints forming in the frost on the floor just a few feet away from me. Then another, and another. I didn't think. I ran. I slammed the chamber door shut, locked it, and sprinted out of the building like it was on fire. I didn't go home that night. I didn't sleep. I just drove. Around the city, around the outskirts, just anywhere that wasn't there. I didn't even look at my phone until morning. When I finally talked to my uncle, he didn't sound surprised, just tired. "I've seen it too," he said. "Ever since that coffin arrived. Lights turning off by themselves, voices in the vents, doors opening just a few inches in the middle of the night." I asked him why he didn't get rid of it, why he didn't tell someone. He paused before answering. Because I don't think we can get rid of her. He told me he tried to move the coffin once, drove it to the crematory himself, but halfway there his brakes gave out. His truck spun off the road. When they pulled it from the ditch, the back doors were wide open, but the coffin was gone. When he got back to the funeral home that night, it was sitting in the cold room again, untouched. That was the last time either of us tried to do anything about it. The coffin's still there, behind locked doors and double insulation. But we both know it doesn't matter. That child, whatever she is, never needed the doors open to move. We just pretend it's not there now. We keep the lights on, the doors locked, and avoid that hallway when we're alone. I don't work there anymore. I left the job a few months after that night. My uncle still runs the place, but he doesn't speak much these days. Every now and then I get calls from him, silent ones, just static. And when I call back, he says he never touched the phone. I haven't been back to that funeral home in over a year, but I still dream about it, about the cold room, about the footprints. Sometimes I dream I open the coffin again, and this time she's awake. I took a funeral home internship in Milwaukee last summer because it was one of the few places that didn't mind hiring someone with barely any experience. It was a small brick building tucked between an old Catholic church and an empty car lot. The guy who owned it, Martin, was quiet but kind. He looked like he hadn't slept properly in years. From the beginning, he told me two things: respect the bodies and never go into the basement. That second rule felt oddly specific, especially since he said it so casually. I assumed it was just for insurance reasons or something, but he had this way of saying things like he wasn't joking, even when he smiled. The place had a lingering smell of roses and formaldehyde that clung to everything. Even when no one was around, I felt like someone was watching from behind the curtains. The cold room where the bodies were stored before preparation always seemed too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like something holding its breath. Martin did most of the embalming himself while I handled calls and setup. I didn't mind the quiet, not until my second week when I heard a tapping noise behind the back wall. It wasn't loud, just enough to make me pause and listen. When I asked Martin about it, he said, "You'll hear things sometimes. Don't answer them." His response stuck with me. What kind of answer was that? I wanted to believe he was messing with me, but he didn't laugh or explain. Just looked at me and walked off like he'd warned me about the weather. That was the first time I started feeling really uneasy there. A few days later, I dropped my key card near the cold room door while rushing to set up a viewing. When I bent down to grab it, I noticed something odd, a faint seam running along the wall, almost like a hidden panel. I rubbed my finger across it. It wasn't a crack. It was intentional, built into the wall. I waited until Martin stepped out to smoke, then I tested the seam again. My curiosity got the better of me. When I pressed hard against it, part of the panel clicked and shifted. The wall slid just slightly inward with a heavy sound, like stone dragging over concrete. Behind it there was a staircase leading down. I stared at it for what felt like minutes, heart thudding in my chest. There was no light, no railing, just rough concrete stairs descending into complete blackness. The air was cold, colder than anywhere else in the building. I thought about going down, but a sudden wave of dread froze me in place. I didn't go down the stairs that day. I closed the panel and pretended like I never saw it. But from then on, I couldn't stop thinking about what might be down there. That hidden basement felt like it was waiting for something, or someone. Over the next few days, I noticed little things that made me uneasy. The cold room would be locked one minute and unlocked the next, even though only Martin and I had keys. Sometimes I'd find the prep room lights flickering, even after changing the bulbs. Martin always shrugged it off like it was just old wiring. One evening, I stayed late to clean after a double service. Martin had already left, so I was alone. While taking out the trash near the cold room, I heard something inside. It wasn't the hum of machinery. This was rhythmic, like slow, steady knocking coming from inside the wall. I pressed my ear to the door and froze. It wasn't just knocking. It sounded like soft breathing from behind the metal door. I backed away quickly and left without finishing the cleaning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that staircase again. The next morning, Martin seemed on edge. He kept checking the front door locks and pacing the hallway like he was expecting someone. "Did you touch the cold room door last night?" he asked me without looking up. I lied and said no. He nodded but didn't believe me. I could tell. Later that day, I caught him standing in front of the hidden panel. He didn't open it, just stood there with his hand on the wall, eyes closed. I turned away before he saw me. Whatever was down there, he knew about it, and he was afraid of it. That night, my curiosity got the better of me. I snuck back into the funeral home after hours. I told myself I just needed to look, just to know what was down there. I brought a flashlight and left my phone recording in my jacket pocket. If anything happened, I wanted proof. I opened the wall panel and started down the stairs, one slow step at a time. The deeper I went, the colder it got. It wasn't like the AC. It was wet, earthy cold, like a cellar that hadn't been opened in years. The flashlight flickered once but stayed on. At the bottom was a concrete floor and a metal door with a heavy lock. It looked newer than the rest of the basement, as if someone had installed it recently. My fingers shook as I touched the handle. I couldn't hear anything on the other side, just my own breathing. I tried the handle again, but it was locked. My heart started to race as I realized I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't just walk away now. I needed to know. So I searched around for something to pry open the lock. My eyes landed on a rusted crowbar in the corner of the basement. With shaking hands, I grabbed the crowbar and wedged it between the doorframe and the lock. The cold, stale air from behind the door seeped out as the lock finally gave way. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open slowly. The sound of the creaking hinges felt deafening in the silence. Behind the door was something I couldn't explain. The room was small, smaller than I expected. It was filled with rows of white plastic bags, the kind used to store bodies. But some of them were moving. I blinked, certain I was seeing things. Yet, as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw it. A figure wrapped in one of those bags, twitching. I backed away slowly, heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was going on? It wasn't possible. The bag shouldn't have been moving. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing, but nothing made sense anymore. I stepped further into the room, and that's when I heard it. Whispering. The voice was faint, like it was coming from all directions at once. "Help me," it whispered. The sound was muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls or beneath the floor. My head spun, and I couldn't breathe. Panic started to set in. I needed to get out, but my legs refused to move. I turned toward the door, but as I did, something caught my eye. On the far side of the room, there was a smaller, unopened body bag. It was different from the others. This one wasn't on a table. It was lying on the ground, crumpled as if it had been thrown there. A part of me wanted to leave, but I couldn't stop looking at it. As I approached the bag, I felt my skin prickle. There was something wrong with it. It was too still, too unnatural. My fingers trembled as I reached for the zipper. The moment I touched it, the whispering stopped. Everything was silent, and for a moment, I thought I imagined the entire thing. I quickly unzipped the bag. What I saw inside made my stomach drop. It was a child. A pale, lifeless child, with bruises around its neck like it had been strangled. But there was no record of this child anywhere. No funeral papers, nothing. And worst of all, there was a small piece of paper in the bag with one word written on it. Please. I left the funeral home that night, but I couldn't escape what I'd seen. Even now, years later, I'm still haunted by that child's face and the word, please. I don't know who was hiding that child in the basement or why they did it, but I'm certain I'm not the only one who knows about it. Every now and then, I still hear that whisper when the wind blows just right.